If there's one genre I have sentimental attachment to, it would have to be point-and-click adventure games. I played 2 SpongeBob point-and-click adventure games whenever I was really young, and something about the genre has always stood out and made it look unique and memorable. I always wanted to get back into point-and-click adventure games, but I could never find a good starting point until I stumbled upon Sam & Max. Despite the freelance police duo starring the 6-foot-tall dog with a gun and his hyperkinetic rabbit friend not initially being video game characters, Telltale Games crafted the two into point-and-click adventure legends. So what better can I do to count down my 6th favorite of the 16 episodes divided across all 3 seasons of the games? And to show a little bit of love from each of the seasons, I'm going to be including 2 episodes per season on this list. So grab your gun, weapon of mass destruction, banang, or whatever, because we're about to hit the road. Even though I thoroughly enjoyed all 3 of the seasons, I could say Season 2 is definitely the weakest in my opinion. I can't really provide any concrete criticism on that. All I can say is I didn't really like the first episode that much, and the second wasn't really enough to make up for that. But the episodes finally managed to pick up once they got to Night of the Raving Dead and Chariots of the Dogs. But I decided to choose Night of the Raving Dead for this one. So what's the main conflict in this episode? Well, it's really typical stuff, just zombies. So due to this random zombie outbreak, Sam and Max have to head to the zombie factory in Stuttgart, Germany. Upon getting there though, you realize that it's more of a club than anything else. We need to get in to find out who's behind the random zombie attacks, but unfortunately, we can't get in right away since the line's super long. This requires minimal puzzle solving. Just grab a brain and throw it onto a place where the zombies can't reach it. Before we go in, however, there are illegal items that we're not allowed to bring in. Anything that could be harmful to a vampire. Once we get inside, we find out the life of the party is... Wait a second. Life of the party... Isn't that counteractive in a party with zombies? Anyway, the life of the party here is Jurgen, the vampire with an emotional backstory. Now, he's not gonna stop sending out zombies anytime soon, so what we gotta do is make him look lame. Well then, the mission has already been accomplished. This is how a Sam & Max episode is typically structured. We're at a point where you have to solve 3 puzzles in order to progress. We'd be here all day if I covered all of the puzzles, so I'm just going to talk about some ones I specifically like. Going back to the main street, you can find some nice items that you can make Jurgen look stupid with. He already looks stupid with his nipple rings, but whatever, we have to add on more to that. You eventually get this really strong light bulb, but you don't know where to use it. On this coffin, there's a plaque that has a secret code on it. Pressing buttons on the DJ's turntable spouts out some words, and putting in the right combination lets you access this light right here that you can use to shine Jurgen with. You'd also figure you'd have to use the garlic cigars in some way, which you do, but you can't get them in normally. No, instead you drive to a TV studio for this old show that's practically sold out more than most YouTubers on this platform. And then you swap out the sponsored product for the garlic cigarettes, and then you come back to Stuttgart and Jurgen is smoking those. I wasn't a fan of coming up with the edgiest rap ever though, since its solution is absolutely stupid. Even if you choose the right lyrics, Jurgen sucks Max's blood and pretty much steals the spotlight. What's the solution to this? Well, it's actually quite simple. Grab a water bottle, head all the way back to your office, get some of that water from the ceremonial urn in your water bottle, drink it right before you go back inside the zombie factory, and then do the rap again. The real puzzle is, how was I supposed to know to do that? After these puzzles, you're eventually led into a trap by Jurgen, and Sam and Max get their souls ripped out. From this point forward, you're now trying to get your souls back. Sam and Max's souls refuse to get back into their body because they've been mistreated or something, so you're going to have to go search for an alternate solution. Back on Main Street, your neighbor Sybil has this artifact known as the Soul Mater, which is pretty obvious that you're going to need that. She's not done with it yet, however. She's running a dating competition of all things. So, how about we bring Jurgen's monster to life and enter him in that little competition. However, Sybil has some very strict requirements, and you can't just go playing Mr. Potato Head on this guy. Another set of 3 puzzles later, getting this guy a new hand, brain, and heart, and there you go, you got your Soul Mater. commander, but Sybil rejects the monster in favor of the head of Abraham Lincoln's memorial. Sim and Max get their souls back, but not in the right bodies. But then, Jurgen comes back, and it's finally time to finish this once and for all. What happens here is what I like to call an action segment, basically a boss fight. Jurgen's reflexes are too fast to use a regular stake on him though. I don't know how this makes much of a difference, but handing the soul mater to the monster allows you to control him, and he's able to land a stab on him, finishing him off. I love the atmosphere of this episode, but some of the puzzles were a little too hard, so it doesn't make it too high up on the list. Before we continue on, I highly recommend that you try out Abe Lincoln Must Die. It's a free episode available on Steam. Out of all the episodes in Season 1, I think this was probably the worst episode that they could have chosen to be free. But that's not because of actual quality, it's more so this episode isn't very beginner friendly. Anyway, this episode starts with Sam and Max being sent by the commissioner to stop the president because he's doing stupid stuff. Sounds pretty typical for America considering the last 10 years of this country's history. I have one bit of criticism though. They start you at the White House, and new players aren't going to know that they need to go back to Main Street to get all the items that they need for puzzle solving. You can't do much here because Superball, who you may remember from Night of the Raving Dead, is guarding the door to the White House. Eventually those new players, including myself, would go back to Main Street, and you'll figure out that Sybil, your next door neighbor, who constantly changes up what her shop's all about, and Bosco, who runs a local inconvenience store, are involved with some of the future puzzles. Calling the payphone next door to the White House moves Superball out of the way so that you can finally get inside. Going inside, you find out that the president's actually been hypnotized by another person disguised as a Secret Service agent. This is Chuckles, and he's from the episode before this, which also contributes to this not being a very good pick for the free episode of the season. Another reoccurring character, one of the soda poppers named Wizard, comes in, and he's become the senator of some state. The president can't understand what he's saying, so by doing the worst translation job possible, the president gives Wizard a soda, and he lives by his name because he mistakes a war room for a restroom, and then Chuckles takes him out. With Chuckles gone, it's time for Sam and Max to stop the... Oh goodness. Well, some presidents never had their heads screwed on that well. With the puppet president out of commission, Chuckles resorts to Plan B. What's Plan B? It's pretty typical. He brings the statue of Abraham Lincoln to life to run for president. Now it's up to Max to run against him. Now, you can say whatever you want to say about any of these politicians that have been coming up recently, but none of them are quite as bad as Max would be. So we're going to need some outside assistance for this one. You have to ask Abraham Lincoln certain questions, but his response will depend on what cue card is currently out. You're supposed to get other signs to serve as cue cards and swap them around to make him look bad. Of course, upon losing the election, Abraham Lincoln goes on a rampage throughout the streets. With Max in power, you now have access to certain things, such as being able to allocate money to certain businesses and get their items. You can give money to Bosco so that you can finally get his item, which is just a bottle of vodka. On another note, the soda poppers are now hanging out in your office. Upon giving Wizard a bottle of vodka, he starts expressing his true feelings about the ideas his brothers have for the states. They declare war on each other, and I couldn't possibly ignore the war song. That song's great. But honestly, I don't really like it when the Lincoln Memorial's rampaging through the streets, so let's go ahead and get that done with. In the war room, you find a location for one of the missile trackers, then you slam it on Abraham Lincoln, and you finish him off. While this episode may not be the best for beginners, I still recommend that you try it out and solve some of the puzzles for yourself. It's fun, if not a little difficult for beginners to handle. But just a question, Mr. Lincoln, how do you think you were going to win? The election wasn't even rigged. What was your plan? Out of all three of the seasons in the series, I can say without a doubt that Season 3 is my personal favorite. People don't like the more serious tone of the episodes, but I like the way the characters react to it like they normally would. Beyond the Alley of the Dolls has had a much more serious plot than the other episodes we've covered so far. Season 3's plot mostly revolves around the Toys of Power, seemingly normal toys that give off mysterious powers. And in this episode, clones of Sam randomly come out of nowhere, but they're being directed selected by someone to gather a bunch of toys in the hopes of finding all of the toys of power. Sam, Max, both of the Stinkies, and General Skunkape are forced to take refuge in Stinky's diner. General Skunkape gets taken away by the Sam clones though, but he drops his last toy of power. And at this point in the story, that gives Max a pretty wide arsenal of abilities to use. After managing to find a secret exit in Stinky's, you now have access to the cloning chamber. Once you get to this point, you have one goal: find the Clone Master. From this point onward, the episode mainly focuses on exploration. Within the cloning chamber, there are 3 tunnels that lead to other areas. You can go to Bosco Tech, where you'd want to go since fingers have been pointed at Mama Bosco that she may have been the ones who've created these clones in the first place. You can go by the docks where Sal's located and where most of the Sam clones are. Or you can go to the museum and get a major plot dump. So without going into too much detail, the person who runs the museum, Anton Paperweight, is kind of a mysterious figure. He's supposedly over a century old, and I'll explain that later, but as of now you use your mind reading powers to open up his door and Spaghetti Monster. Okay, so a lot of questions from earlier on in the season are answered in this episode. I guess this is why you shouldn't do a countdown on this topic. Until this point, this creature known as Yogg-Sothoth was briefly mentioned in other episodes, but as of now, there's been this mysterious figure known as Dr. Norrington who'd accompany Paperweight. Dr. Norrington is just an alias for Yogg-Sothoth. Why he's lodged in the Paperweight's torso will be explained later on in the list. Anyway, Yogg-Sothoth explains why he's there in the first place, why the Toys of Power are there, and what the Clone Master is possibly trying to do. Yogg-Sothoth is an Elder God Cthulhu monster. Oh, and he comes from a dark dimension. Eventually, he had a grandson referred to as Junior. And Junior is far more powerful and destructive than he is. So he brought the Toys of Power to keep him distracted, but then moles happen. They got a hold of a toy that can counter dark... Wait a second. There's a toy that counters dark beasts. And these toys were made for dark beasts. That's like if knives were considered toys. Anyway, long story short, they were banished away by their own toys. And then the Toys of Power were scattered across the land. If someone were to gather all the toys and the Devil's Toy Box, then they would be able to bring the Dark Dimension into this reality. So now I can talk about the gameplay of this episode. Unfortunately, I think it's a little bit lacking with the puzzles at certain points. Sam's inventory does not get used to its fullest, and even though Max has access to all of his psychic powers in this episode, well, you only really use rhinoplasty and mind reading, but something that completely makes up for this comes in the form of exploration. The other areas that you can go to change as the episode proceeds on. Flint arrives at Stinky's to interrogate Girl Stinky. You end up doing a seance to summon Mama Bosco and then create a new body for her, and the suspects as to who may be the Clone Master slowly get whittled down over time. Girl Stinky and Sal get possessed by the Clone Master halfway through, and Mama Bosco just says that she was paid to create the clones. And I'm pretty sure no one saw this coming, but in an absolutely insane twist, Sam and Max track down the location of the toy box, and just whenever Max decides to use ventriloquism, it's revealed that it was the ventriloquism doll, Charlie Hotep, the whole time. What? The clones knock the duo out and bring them to the Statue of Liberty, where they're performing a ritual to revive Junior and then bring the Dark Dimension into this reality. What am I playing? So Charlie Hotep is essentially Woody from Toy Story if he went mentally insane. Also, Paperweight and Yogg-Sothoth are there for some reason. You can use them to distract Charlie so that you can change the music, and this in turn changes the positioning of the Sam clones as well as the appearance of the Statue of Liberty. After using a running gag throughout the series to progress, as well as the new features of the Statue of Liberty, Max eventually gets to the top. Max and Charlie are then locked into a psychic showdown where you have access to all of your abilities. It would have been cool if you got to use all your abilities to defeat him, but instead you just use the main 3 that have been used throughout this episode. Max can use mind reading and then use rhinoplasty to transform into Sam's thoughts. Sam's thoughts, of course, change depending on the music you're listening to. Charlie will turn into something that can counter what you're currently transformed into, but that ends up causing his own demise. You can get him to turn into the Chthonic Destroyer and then destroy the toy box, which of course results in him getting defeated. This episode was something really great. It didn't rely on your inventory, which is kind of surprising. Instead, it focused on you exploring everything. And personally, I find that a great change of pace. These NASCAR adventures have been pretty long, so I want to speed up the process. And fittingly enough, we're actually talking about one of the shorter episodes in the series. The Mole, the Mob, and the Meatball requires Sam and Max to go explore a totally mafia-free casino to go find a mole that has been sent to investigate. And this episode has a series of mafia and casino-themed puzzles, including playing a game of Indian poker against a cheater who was ripped straight out of Telltale Texas Hold'em, a game that's much more horrifying than anything seen in the last episode. Oh, and real quickly, this puzzle did something correct that Night of the Living Dead did not do. You need this card that's clearly shown in the intro, and it's pretty obvious that you'd use a card for a situation like this. That and you notice in The Office. Unlike in Night of the Living Dead where I thought that the ceremonial urn was just a decoration. They say cheaters never win. Well, that's a big fat lie. Also using Bosco's new organic listening device to listen in for the password to get into the mob room. Then you're tasked by the Toy Mafia to get a Hypno Bear into Bosco's store, kill Sybil, and retrieve the original meatball sandwich. Then the cheater from earlier turns out to be the culprit who stole the meatball sandwich. And if the graphics didn't show this game's age already, then torturing him with Yo Mama jokes certainly will. But after accomplishing these tasks, it's revealed that Don E. Teddy Bear was actually the mole the whole time. After a quick car chase and returning to the back room, Sam and Max find a Hypno Bear factory. After playing dead and acting hypnotized and reconstructing a Hypno Bear, you use it against them and the whole factory goes kablooey. The only issue I have with this episode is that it was the shortest out of all of the ones I played. But perhaps its short length was a blessing in disguise. Besides, it had an excellent pace and incredibly fun puzzles.
You're going straight to hell!
That's correct! This episode takes place in everyone's favorite location. Hell. Wait, excuse me? It's not our favorite location? Then why do we keep on insisting on living in it? I think What's New Beelzebub, or however you pronounce that, has some of the best puzzles in the series. That and also it adores continuity. Need an example? Look at the first puzzle. You need the Mametron to obtain a token so that you can go to hell in the first place. I don't know why Sam and Max need one of those. I mean, they're perfectly fit for it. Anyway, you need a remote control to control him. In the previous episode, Chariots of the Dogs, an episode about time travel, there's a point where you time travel to your office in an unspecified date. Whenever you try and grab the remote, a Sam from an alternate timeline exchanges an egg for the remote. Now back to this episode, look at what you've got in your inventory. Because of how it plays off of your knowledge of the previous episode, I can easily say that that's one of my favorite puzzles in the entire series. Once you get to hell, you actually get to see a couple of the villains from the previous episodes. Alongside that, you need to rescue souls from this chamber over here. These also have some really neat puzzles. I can't go over all of them, but there's another one I want to mention. In Grandpa Stinky's personal hell, he has to stay on a cooking show with Girl Stinky. But then YouTube's demonetization squad comes along and tells Stinky that if there's any more cursing on the show, that it's cancelled. So how about we kill a little kid who curses way too much, putting the monster from Night of the Living Dead out of his misery just so we can distract the Reaper.
Please kill me.
Well, if you say so. Then swap out little old Timmy Two Teeth's sin files for his father's, which earns him a nice place in hell and on Stinky's TV show.
Hiya, Jimmy.
Is your soul finally at peace?
No, I'm not at peace, Mr. Max. I'm ecstatic to be on stage with such a genius.
After saving everyone from their personal hells, including saving Sam from his own, Satan loses his position of power and gets replaced by the Soda Poppers. The Soda Poppers then proceed on with their plan of Armageddon. So with the help from Satan's mundane items, Sam and Max go out to stop the Soda Poppers. And if you're wondering why this wasn't a kid's game, well, you're just about to find out. Temptation. Seduction, or as I like to call it, an action I'd rather not describe. And my personal...
Hey guys, you're just in time for the stripper.
Oh boy! Oh god!
More seduction, or probably lust. Would you get out of here? Oh, and before we carry on, there's a part where we need to hear what Timmy Two Teeth is saying, but in order to do that, we have to replace the censor list with Satan's grocery list. And this reveals that YouTube's demonetization program is way too strict. Anyways, once we've foiled the Popper's plan, they send Sam and Max to a hellhole. But thanks to a Deus Ex Machina set up in Ice Station Santa, hell freezes over. So with the combined work of tar cake, flammable urine, and birthdays, we send the Poppers down in the hellhole. This episode is absolutely brilliant. It's freaking hilarious, the puzzles are fantastic, and it has an awesome Sam & Max feel. What's New Beelzebub gave me everything I wanted in a Sam & Max episode. Except number 1 gave me something I never knew I wanted out of a Sam & Max episode.
It is said she will yield her secrets only to one whose powers are equal to those of Samun Mak himself. Might you be that favored individual?
In my favorite episode, Sam & Max Season 3 Episode 2, The Tomb of Samun Mak, Sam and Max discover skeletons of their great-grandfathers as well as some film reels of their last adventure. They start the film at the halfway point in which Sam and Max's grandfathers, Samus and Maximus, appear to be in a tomb, have a hold of the devil's toy box, but a Santa Claus figure is after them. After managing to escape the confrontation, they still can't get out because they don't know the password to exit. After this, Sam and Max switch to the first reel showing the beginning of the film. In a local theater, a man by the name of Anton Paperweight is issuing the Sphinx Challenge. Whoever can make it through the Sphinx gets 2 tickets to Egypt for the adventure of a lifetime. There are also 3 other reels that take place after this. Now, due to how this episode is structured, I'm going to have to get ahead of ourselves for just a second here. After you clear the Sphinx Challenge, Paperweight sends Samus and Maximus on a mission to go to Egypt and get the devil's toy box from the tomb of Samun Mak. So why did I skip ahead there? It's because you can switch between any of the 4 reels at any time. Within this first reel, you can't even get through the Sphinx Challenge because you're missing the can of nuts. But you can't get the can of nuts because these elves have it. And also you can't progress past the beginning of the first reel because of what I stated earlier. But this introduces one of the best mechanics I've ever seen in any game. So, for one part of the Sphinx Challenge, you need to read these hieroglyphics. You get the answer to this from this mole woman here. But if you're paying attention, then you'll notice that the Sphinx Challenge's hieroglyphics are the same as the ones on the exit door of the tomb. And now that you have this information, you can exit the tomb now. While logically it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, it's still an absolutely amazing mechanic. You can obtain information from future or past reels, and then use that information to solve puzzles in other reels. So now we got that out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and list what happens in every single reel. In the first reel, you have to complete the challenge of the Sphinx. In the second reel, you invade the tomb. In the third, on the train back to home, someone steals the toy box and you have to go find it. And in the fourth, you tell Paperweight about what you did in every situation. The first reel isn't anything all too special, it mainly just establishes characters and future events. The second reel, on the other hand, tones things up immensely. Exploring the tomb is fun, there's so many different puzzles and characters to interact with. This is also where you get the ventriloquism power. While I do think can of nuts is just fine enough, it's not nearly as well used as ventriloquism. Both of the powers are well used here. You use curses from moment to your advantage to solve some puzzles. There's even one where you mix ventriloquism with a knockback curse. Then there's a third reel, which is almost as good as the previous one. In this reel, you have to very politely barge in to every passenger's room to see if they have the toy box. My absolute favorite of these was getting a vampire elf to bite Jurgen, preventing him from entering his own room since he has too many vampire killers in there. Also, I just find it funny that these two are the reason why Jurgen's a vampire to begin with. But once they get back, Paperweight actually tricked him into retrieving the toy box so that he could summon Yogg-Sothoth.
Now you say, Umke Onine, the other race Einfei.
Well, if you say so. Well, surprisingly, that's actually not what you're supposed to do. After using the Sphinx to get Charlie Hotep back in Maximus's hands, you trick Paperweight into getting into the circle. After that, say the magic word. It's too bad that Samus and Maximus's deaths were more unnecessary than the discontinuation of this series, but as you can tell, I think that this episode is nearly perfect. Even though I generally don't like settings like this completely blew me away. It was unlike anything I ever expected. The adventure was great, the puzzles were brilliant, this episode has everything, and the cherry on top was the excellent mechanic. I'm Luigi Magic NX, and when do I think we'll ever get a Sam & Max Season 4? Well, the answer is quite simple. I think we'll get Sam & Max Season 4 once Half-Life 3 comes out, but Half-Life 3 won't come out till Mother 3 is officially localized. But Mother 3 won't be officially localized until the I Am Me reboot hits stores' shelves. But that won't happen until Telltale Games stops being lazy. So I guess the simple answer is never.